the soldiers discovered a strange phenomenon. The ghosts were actually being stopped by a pile of inconspicuous iron filings outside the factory. As soon as a ghost touched these iron filings, it would be automatically absorbed, making it impossible to move. The soldiers guessed that iron might be the key weapon against the ghosts. Furthermore, the iron filings were sprinkled in a circle around the building, obviously placed there deliberately to protect this area from the ghost invasion. This meant there could be other people inside the factory, and whoever laid down the iron filings definitely knew the truth about the ghosts. Based on these clues, the team immediately began to search the entire building. Finally, on the top floor, the team captain waved for everyone to follow. They held their breath and cautiously approached a large door. Just as they were about to open it, the sound of machine gun fire erupted from within the room, narrowly missing the surrounding soldiers. After the gunfire stopped, one soldier quickly kicked the door open, and a teammate tossed in a flashbang. Once the bright light faded, the soldiers charged into the room to attack, but they found no danger inside. There was only a pair of siblings, a brother and sister, trembling in a corner. The sister saw that these men didn't look like robbers, so she bravely started talking to them. It turns out, the iron filings outside the factory were placed by their father. Since the girl's father knew the ghost's weakness, he also very likely knew their origin. But unfortunately, her father was killed by the ghosts while setting up the iron filings, leaving the brother and sister to fend for themselves. The girl led Mark and Melanie to the room where her father's body was kept. Mark found a piece of ceramic and a map marking the location of a nuclear power plant on her father's body. The girl pointed out that the nuclear power plant was the root of all their problems. At that moment, the communications officer finally contacted the base, requesting helicopter and tank support. However, due to the factory's complex environment, the helicopter couldn't land directly. They needed to go to a plaza a kilometer away to rendezvous. But the problem was, what about the ghosts outside? While everyone was arguing about whether they should leave, Mark alone was focused on the iron filings. Since the filings could restrict the ghosts' movement, they could use them to create special bombs as a powerful defense against the ghost attacks. Without delay, everyone sprang into action. They found empty glass bottles in the factory, stuffed them full of iron filings, added a suitable amount of black powder, and then sealed the bottles with tape. Finally, they took the triggers from grenades and inserted them into the sealed bottle openings. Just like that, a simple iron filing dirty bomb was made for these battle-hardened Special Forces soldiers. Making such a crude bomb was a piece of cake. Even their bullets were replaced with high-explosive rounds filled with iron filings. Mark didn't stay idle either, considering the soldiers' damaged goggles. He re-engineered parts of a hyperspectral camera into a large searchlight to help them see the ghosts. This new device could emit long-wave ultraviolet light, making the ghosts visible to the naked eye. He then relayed the modification instructions to the support troops. Just as everything was ready, a soldier on watch suddenly noticed something strange in the building across the street. Mark quickly brought over the modified searchlight, and after adjusting the angle, the light shot straight ahead. They discovered that a large number of ghosts were gathered in the ruins opposite them. It turned out, after failing to break through the ground defenses, the ghosts had moved to the tall building across the street and were now using the high-voltage power lines to attack them. Seeing the overwhelming number of ghosts approaching, the group had no choice but to pack their equipment and evacuate the factory early. But just as they stepped out of the factory's back door, hoping to slip away quietly, the ghosts spotted them and rushed towards them. Now, there was no turning back. The ghosts were agile and hard to hit, seeing that the first few rounds missed and the ghosts were already upon them. A soldier, out of options, threw an iron filing bomb directly at the ground. Unexpectedly, the dust cloud of iron filings from the explosion successfully trapped the ghost's legs. It seemed this new weapon was effective. However, there were too many ghosts. The remaining soldiers were severely outnumbered. They had no choice but to fight and retreat, like a flock of lambs being chased by wolves. The scene was incredibly perilous. The iron filing bombs could only temporarily restrain the ghosts, not destroy them completely. Before long, the ghosts broke free and continued their relentless pursuit. As the battle intensified, more and more ghosts joined the chase, swarming towards them like zombies that had smelled blood. This terrified everyone. They could only fight back while sprinting towards the plaza. Along the way, people were constantly getting injured and falling. But the squad didn't dare stop to rest. They had to grit their teeth and keep running, because the pursuing ghosts were right behind them. At a critical moment, the soldiers had a flash of insight and launched a large number of iron filing bombs. The dense cloud of iron instantly formed a temporary defensive line, like a wall, momentarily blocking the ghost pursuit. The squad finally made it to the plaza, but then Mark's modified searchlight, which had been working overtime, gave out. Just great. Now they were all blind. They had no choice but to hide in an abandoned bus and wait for support. Just as they were anxiously waiting, the roar of the rescue team's tanks arrived, bringing a glimmer of hope. And they were all equipped with hyperspectral searchlights. They spotted that the opposite building was full of ghosts. Seeing those restless figures, the tank gunner in front of the searchlight quickly ducked back inside as Mark and the others ran out from the bus. The tank began to adjust its cannon and launched a fierce attack on the ghosts in the building. But after several shells were fired, Mark and his team were knocked off their feet by the blast. Yet the ghosts stood up completely unharmed, and even seemed more excited. Mark and the others quickly sought cover. They knew that conventional weapons couldn't cause any real damage to the ghosts. Just as the rescue team got out of their vehicles to confront the ghosts head-on, the surviving deputy team leader frantically waved his arms, trying to warn them that the ghosts could ignore physical damage. But it was too late. The ghosts had already begun their charge. They trailed long after images, swooping in like dragons, and quickly pounced on the soldiers, beginning a merciless slaughter. Seeing the newly arrived reinforcements fall one by one, Mark realized he had made a grave mistake. He had only told the reinforcements to install searchlights, but he hadn't told them about the ghost's weakness. The poor reinforcements were all wiped out less than a minute after arriving. The bloodthirsty ghosts didn't even spare the tanks. But surprisingly, while the ghosts could easily pass through walls, they couldn't pass directly through the tanks. The ghosts themselves seemed slightly stunned when they felt the tank's solid form. Mark saw all of this after a few impacts. Although the soldiers inside weren't killed directly, the tank was smashed into a pile of scrap metal. The searchlight mounted on it was also destroyed, having lost their light source. The soldiers were plunged into darkness once again, and the ghosts became invisible, instantly taking more lives. The little boy, trying to retrieve his father's belongings, exposed himself to the ghost's view and was brutally killed before help could arrive. His body left in the ruins. Clearly, these ghosts were pure killing machines, devoid of any emotion. Faced with such a desperate situation, everyone was on the verge of despair. However, there's always a way out. A rescue helicopter arrived at the scene. Everyone quickly ran towards it, preparing to escape this hellish place. The ghosts weren't ready to let them go, and swarmed around them. But, affected by the helicopter's downdraft, their speed was greatly reduced. Seeing this, Mark had an idea. He took off all the iron filing bombs he was carrying and slammed them onto the ground, aided by the strong wind from the helicopter's propellers. The iron filings were blown into the air, forming a deadly rain of steel needles that shot towards the ghosts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soldiers helped Mark quickly board the helicopter and evacuate the scene. The crisis was finally, temporarily, averted, but before they could recover from the tension, they received another shocking piece of news. Headquarters had completely fallen. A large number of ghosts had overrun the entire city and were on a killing spree. On the ground, every flash of white light represented a human killed by a ghost. It seemed this nightmare had just begun. For now, they could only take refuge in a temporary shelter set up for civilians. After arriving at the shelter, everyone felt uneasy, wondering how long this place could hold out. Maybe the ghost would overrun it in a moment. The captain told everyone to find out how they knew to use iron filings against the ghosts. They then learned that her father was a ceramic container manufacturing engineer at the nuclear power plant, and the ghosts that attacked them came from that plant. Just as they were talking, the general arrived at the shelter with his remaining troops. Seeing the grim look on the general's face, you didn't need to guess that the situation back at the camp was beyond terrible. The general sighed and said, "These ghosts are too powerful. Out of 6,000 special forces soldiers at our base, only 19 are left alive, and you are the last of the U.S. forces here." Hearing this, everyone's morale collapsed. Everyone, from the general to the privates, was arguing about whether to leave this godforsaken place. Only Mark sat to one side, as if nothing was wrong. Lost in thought, suddenly, he had a flash of insight and finally understood everything. This was all a new type of weapon created by the rebels. The soldier who was rescued earlier survived because he hid under a bathtub. The tanks in the plaza were wrecked by the ghosts, but the ghosts couldn't pass through their hulls. That's because the tanks had a thick layer of ceramic armor. This indicated that the ghosts could not pass through ceramic objects. This meant the ghosts weren't a natural phenomenon, but were man-made in the world. Besides the common solid, liquid, and gas states, there is also an artificial state of matter called a Bose-Einstein condensate. It can be slowed by iron, cannot penetrate ceramic, but can pass through walls, and has such a low temperature that human contact results in instant death. These characteristics are strikingly similar to the so-called ghost phenomenon. To successfully create a Bose-Einstein condensate, a huge amount of energy is required. The little girl said the ghost came from the nuclear power plant, which fits the condition perfectly. This means the nuclear power plant is their ghost factory. Although Mark still couldn't explain why those ghosts retained human form and possess self-awareness. That didn't matter. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and support our channel.